Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of GFactor with Glenys. I'm your host today, Glenys Gassman, and today's guest is John Toomey. Welcome, John.
Hey, Glenys. How you going?
Yeah, good, thank you. John is currently the Global Chair of the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative and Global Wellness Institute. And in addition to being a speaker and a licensed avatar master, John was the author of Australia's first certification in wellness leadership, which he wrote in 1999. And he has a new book called In It for the Long Haul, after a couple of other things that he's doing right now, which are exciting. And we're going to get to talk about that during the show. So welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show, John. Whereabouts are you coming in from today?
I'm in beautiful Elwood in the Bayside suburbs of Melbourne. So where I am is, if I wanted to run into the city from here, it would be about 8 Ks, I suppose.
Oh, fantastic. So you do some running, yeah?
Oh, yeah, that's the rules.
I know they have beautiful running tracks all the way through from Port Melbourne, I believe, right through St Kilda, all the way down to the Bayside suburbs, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I think now you can go on a track all the way to Frankston and beyond.
Yeah, amazing. That's just amazing.
I haven't quite gone that far, but yeah. Yeah,
great. Fantastic. Awesome. So, John, I'd like to start the show off with, things that you're currently working on and obviously excited about. And, COVID is still a real issue here in Australia. And then I know that you're doing some work with companies related to health. So can you tell us more about how you're helping companies look beyond vaccination? It's a big topic here in the media right now, and to empowering their employees to be more personally responsible for their own health.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose I'm doing that on two levels, Glenys. The first one is with the Global Wellness Institute, which is based in Miami in Florida. And the Global Wellness Institute's been around for a long time. It's a research-based organisation. They publish really good quality research, anything related to wellness across the world. And as part of the Global Wellness Institute, there's a number of initiatives that specialise in certain areas. And one of them, of course, is the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative, which I've been chair of for a little over a year now. And we looked at this current situation and we looked at the incredible uncertainty that exists. And it's not just Australia, it's everywhere, right across the planet. And we're going through change that probably nobody could have predicted. And, we're still trying to find our way through the change. And a big part of it is this whole thing of the nature of work changing and people now learning to work from home and deciding to work from home, and the changes in lifestyle that come with that, and then the challenges for companies who have got premises that they've rented or owned where they want their employees to work, but the employees don't want to go there. So there's this whole thing where everybody's learning a new way of going. And so, and obviously because of the virus, and because of the mental health issues that have popped up in relation to it, there's this whole new quandary and a whole new sort of attention on well-being.
Yeah.
And workplace well-being. So with my initiative, and I've got these incredibly talented people from the US, the UK, Sweden, South Africa, Israel, we've decided to create a set of standards. So workplace wellbeing standards that organisations can employ to use as their sort of a cross between a roadmap and a set of guideposts, I suppose, to help them develop more of a wellbeing culture within their workplace. So that's on one side. On the other side, me personally, part of the challenge here is that we're not sure what's going to happen, you know. And talking with my colleagues overseas, for example, Israel now are going through their third round of vaccinations, so people are having their third dose. But last Thursday, they had their biggest COVID numbers ever. They broke through 11,000 cases, and they have a third of the population of Australia. So that gives you a bit of an insight. That would be like Australia being fully vaccinated, going for a third round of vaccines and having 35,000 cases a day.
Yeah.
And so, and I think we're sort of living in a little bit of a Pollyanna sort of environment at the moment. We've got this belief that once our vaccines are at 80% or more, that COVID's going to go away. But it's not. It's here for good. And, we're just seeing new variants popping up all the time. Some of them are quite innocuous and harmless, and some of them are going to be nasty. Mm-hmm. And so, but we can't keep shutting the economy down. And the question I ask is, are we prepared to keep going back and having booster vaccines every 6 months? And if we do, what's the cost of that going to be? And I'm sure Pfizer and Moderna and those guys aren't going to be giving it away in show bags. They're going to want full commercial grunt for it. So what I'm looking at now is how to inspire organisations to take the next step and start to have the conversation that we probably should have been having 18 months ago. And that is, what can every individual do to take better care of their own immunity, to really strengthen their own immune systems, so that won't stop anybody getting the virus, but it will certainly minimise the impact of the virus. And then at the same time, how can we inspire and educate and empower people to take greater responsibility over the thoughts that they're allowing to dominate their minds, which lead to distress and mental health conditions and those sorts of things. So that's the challenge. That's where I'm heading right now. And I feel like people like me have got to be bold. We've got to be courageous, and we've got to push these conversations because we need to have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I acknowledge you for being bold and, having these courageous conversations, because we do need this in the world. And you're right when we talk about the Pollyanna syndrome, really. And it's probably another way, I think, of people hanging on to that, the need for certainty. So, we have this need for certainty and we have this need for uncertainty. We have that. And we've had so much uncertainty that, oh, yeah, please, we'll have the virus and then everything's going to go away. No, I agree. And in fact, I'm going to say something more bold as well, right? And that is, I still think Queensland and Western Australia are going to get the Delta variants, and they're just blindfolded right now, because when we open up, when, New South Wales and Victoria open up with 80% double dose vaxxed, they're going to be coming up to Queensland. They're going to go over to Western Australia. We're going to get it. And so, and we do not want it locked down. We don't want the business environment locked down. We have to learn a new way to live. And so you're on track with it. In fact, you're ahead of your time, probably. Personally myself, I want to say that, my whole COVID experience down in 21 weeks lockdown in Melbourne last year, caused me to put on about 15 kilos all up, I reckon. And
we've all done that.
I know, we've all done that, right? And then I took full responsibility of that, back in June, and I've employed a food scientist coach. He's a well-known scientist who understands the human body and nutrition. And I've been following his protocol since July, 12 weeks. I'm down 10.5 kilos. Every time I jump on the scales every week, it's like boom, boom, boom. But further to that, I want to say is that you talk about well-being and mindset and all of that, how it's connected. It's like the more weight you lose and the more cleaner your gut becomes, the more clarity in your mind becomes, and you got more energy to build up this immunity to what's going on out there. So, I personally, went through a couple of weeks back in Melbourne last year where, I was letting my uncertainty take over. But then it was like, no, I just put on a few webinars for a few business owners. And as soon as I started helping others and doing that, it really did, change my way of thinking. But the kilos still piled on, So, But, I think that's the next step. I agree totally. The whole well-being of people and taking personal responsibility for how that's going to look like in the workplace is a whole new level of conversation that people need to be having. And it's an evolution. So what made you get really involved? You've been in wellness for a long time. You've been involved in wellness for a while now. Has it always been, it's quite topical now, and you wrote your first certification in wellness in 1999, I think. So, has health always been something at the highest priority for you to get yourself involved in? Where did all that come from?
Well, I suppose, you could track all that all the way back, I suppose. But, as a teenager, I was mad on sport, and, I loved sport. And so while my mates were doing whatever they're doing, I was going out running. I wanted to be fit, and I loved that whole feeling of being fit. And then just after I finished my phys ed degree, actually in my last year of my phys ed degree, when I was studying full-time and working full-time, convenience, because of the hours I was putting in, because, phys ed degree, it was like 35 hours, contact hours per week.
Wow, that's a lot.
Plus holding down a full-time job, plus squeezing in some training. That sort of led me to a place where I became a vegetarian. And just because I didn't have the time or the inclination to eat meat for some time, and then I sort of liked how that felt, so I stayed a vegetarian. In fact, became what I call a pure vegetarian, so that's not as intense as vegan, but and I've been that way for 40 years now. So I suppose when you sort of follow that there's always interest, but also the other part of it is I'm just a curious human being. I've always been really curious, and if I ask a question and somebody gives me an answer that's a bit dogmatic or a bit, I suppose indoctrinated, and it's an answer that doesn't give me understanding, well, I can't rest on that. I need to be able to understand.
Find out more, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was in the mid-'80s when I started working with professional footballers. So I did high-performance roles in the AFL for a lot of years. In fact, it was funny, this morning I got a call from an old colleague. I was, when 9/11 happened, we were actually running a camp, and I was doing some self-development work with the Football Kings from Auckland.
Okay.
Sydney, remember them? The soccer team?
Yeah, the soccer team.
But it was whilst I was working with athletes that I discovered that there's athletes I was working with who just did not marry up to the theories presented in my Western science textbooks.
Mm.
They were different. Their adaptation to training was different. And so I started to have to look outside the box. And that was when I started to talk with all sorts of people, naturopaths, yogis, qigong masters. And I met a wonderful yogi by the name of Neil Hoptman, who is originally from Detroit, but he's just a citizen of the planet, Neil. He's a beautiful man. And he had written a book called Help Yourself to Health. So this is in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And he developed a program called the Health Enhancement Lifestyle Program, HELP. And so he and I started spending a lot of time talking. I learned so much from Neil, and he opened my eyes on so many areas. And so that was what led me into writing the first wellness leadership course and having that accredited. But then, a few years after that, in 2005, I stepped into an Avatar course room. And the Avatar course is a 9-day experiential program using tools where you explore your own consciousness, and the answers you find are your answers. So there's nobody telling you what to do. There's no sort of guru up the front of the room telling you how life is,
Yeah. No right or wrong, just you, whatever you come up with, yeah.
And it's the purest form of discovery. And by the end of the Avatar course is what happens for you is that the core of your being wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize that your mind is a mind, but it's not who you are. There's a big separation in there. And I was sitting there at the end of that course, just contemplating, feeling this incredible stillness and peace. And I realized that if you looked at the wellness pie chart,
Yep.
I just discovered 60% of the pie chart that I didn't know existed before, which is really about how people's consciousness is structured. And most of us, our consciousness is very much structured on the stuff that we're indoctrinated to believe as we go through life.
Yep.
But just because we believe it doesn't mean it's true. And probably the greatest challenge we have right now is that there's certain things that we've got listed as truth in our minds that may not be true. And so that's causing a lot of headbutting and a lot of conflict in society, people who are robust, total faith believers in, for example, pharmaceutical medicine. And then there's those people who don't trust pharmaceutical medicine. Now, neither one of them is right or wrong, but instead of them learning to explore and get interested in the other person's viewpoint, they're just butting heads, and it's conflict. And
it is. And it's actually, it's the way, unfortunately, the way the world works at the moment, because most of the heads of countries do operate like that. They have a certain truth about themselves, and then that's where we get all these conflicts and that. And I love the way how you said, the mind is a mind, and there's a big separation about who we are and the mind, and not a lot of people have got that yet.
I saw a quote the other day that something said, "Don't tell me it's science if I can't question it, because if I can't question it, it's not science, it's propaganda."
Oh dear, and yeah, cool. There's actually, I've been noticing there's quite a lot of interesting quotes that are coming out of this. It's definitely, we're in this era of change. We're right smack in the middle of this era of change, and being aware of that and conscious of it, and actually educating ourselves around that, rather than having, like you said, the truths, something being the truth. I actually say nothing's the truth. It's all made up. Yeah. It really is, and it's made up based on our past and influences that we have had, from our parents to our school teachers to whatever, kids in the playground. And we have to educate ourselves to be able to understand what's really true for us, where do you think the perception of health has shifted over the last few decades in relation to what you do? What do you see as the biggest challenge now, or the biggest change, I should say, being from when you first started to now? So back then in the 90s or the 80s, and then to now, what's the biggest change you think?
I think the biggest change is the domination of pharmaceuticals. Really, pharmaceuticals dominates healthcare across the world, and you can look at that and say, wow, that's wrong, that's evil, that's corrupt. No, it's just smart business. I marvel at the way that they've done that, and we've moved away from personal responsibility. And so what we've arrived at is a place where people look at disease as an affliction as opposed to a creation. If you look at it as an affliction, well, then it's something that happened to you and somebody needs to save you from it. So the pharmaceutical industry's got a tablet for you, or they got something
for you. Yeah.
And the same's happening with mental illness, and I would almost, stick my neck out and say that over 99% of cases of people having mental health problems, it starts out with really screwed up thinking, and it ends up, and I know there's complicating factors to it, and I get it. And some people get to the point where they're so lost, they need a lot of care, and maybe they need pharmaceutical support as well. But we're talking about a very small percentage of people there. But the way that we talk about it now, we talk about it as if people are a victim of some sort of affliction, rather than getting really interested in is, how's that person been living their life, and how can we help them take ownership of where they're at so they can start to help in the process of backing themselves out of that predicament, whatever that is.
Whatever that is, yeah. I say that, I think, sorry to cut you off there, I have heard that 95% of mental health issues are just unresolved issues from the past, from people. And it's just reared its ugly head again, and it goes in this vicious circle. I actually see it as a business coach in relation to people's performance, business coaches' performance. So I mentor business coaches, and I see that things from the past, they haven't resolved it. They haven't taken ownership of. So if I ask a business coach, so how did that session go with that client? What were two things that were really great about that session from your delivery and from your coaching? And what were two things that actually you could improve on? They find it really hard to actually get authentic and look at themselves and go, I didn't do that well. I might do this time. And that's improvement. That's curious. That's being able to really look at themselves and move forward, right? But most of them don't do that. It's, the person wasn't listening. It's always about outside blame, excuse, or deny, which is what I call like under the line behavior. Whereas above the line behavior is what you're alerting to, is around about taking responsibility, ownership, and accountability for exactly what it is that people need for their mental health, and getting curious as to and learning about themselves. But I think doesn't that come back to the fact that they don't see themselves as different from their mind? Like they see it as one.
I think Harry Palmer wrote that beautifully. He talked about, where you and your mind traded off from running your life until the mind took over,
Yeah.
And it's like it talks about how, when you fall into a mind trap and become a story, and it does happen, and it's life's great, one of life's great challenges, and it's fascinating when you look at it. But self-investigation and self-exploration, that's where the gold dust of existence is found. For me, I know, but it's not for everybody. But I suppose at the end of the day, my journey through all the years that I've delivered avatar courses and those sorts of things, I can never escape from the fact that everything I'm experiencing is something that I've created, but I've got to be careful about saying that and then people then taking that intellectually and then getting into self-blame, because it's not about self-blame. It's about getting curious and discovery and learning about yourselves and learning about, for me, where my decisions are coming from. And, like it was very interesting. Just last week, I had a really significant epiphany, because I was looking at the fact that, right now in Australia and across the world, there is enormous corporate influence on government, enormous corporate influence. And about 4 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, I went to an evening with Barry Jones. And you remember Barry Jones, who was the science minister in the Hawke and Keating governments. And Barry is very rare intellect, a beautiful, beautiful human being. And he'd written a book. He's written many books. Barry's one of those people who reads 15,000 words a minute with 100% comprehension.
Oh, amazing!
And he was talking about this book that he'd written. I think it's called Knowledge, Courage, Leadership. And he was saying that the two major parties in Australia are no longer political parties; they're corporations. They have less than 100 members each per electorate. Mm-hmm. They now govern for their benefactors, not for the citizens. And you can look at that and say, that's bad, that's wrong, that's evil. But what I went for is, okay, so how have I created that? How did I do that? And through my contemplations, I had this really significant realization that not in my entire life have I ever turned up to a political meeting. Not at any time have I participated in the process and looked a candidate in the eye and made them accountable.
Yep.
My parents used to, but I reckon sometime in the 70s when television got interesting in the evenings, people stopped going to those things, and we as a collective society abandoned our politicians and left them to their own devices, and corporate filled up that vacuum.
Yep.
Now, and some people say to me, I'm political active, I go to protests. But that's not being politically active, that's just being rebellious. Being politically active is getting involved in a party and supporting some candidates. And if you don't like the two major parties, well, start some more parties and get some more candidates in there who are not going to follow the party line, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And just taking responsibility. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's all the people who are sending me all the conspiracy theory stuff, and it's coming at me thick and fast all the time. Now I'm just sending him a note back and saying, when was the last time you were politically active? I don't mean on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me, what's the funniest conspiracy theory that you've had sent to you?
Without a doubt, that the Chinese created a virus.
Yeah.
Like, what a load of rot that is. I mean, even the lab that they're talking about is a French-owned lab that happens to be located in Wuhan province in China. What a load of crock that is. That is such a racist viewpoint. I mean, that is so racist. I mean, why would the Chinese? And I suppose and the other really kooky one is that it's a man-made virus that's designed to control the planet and control the population and cull the population and all that sort of stuff. And I thought to myself, man, we cannot even get governments to come together to agree on feeding starving people on the planet. So how in hell are you going to get people to agree to do something like this?
Exactly.
It's so delusional and so crazy and mad. But what I do see, what I do agree with, this is a lot of corporate opportunism going on at the moment.
It's very much opportunism. Even that in the governments as well. You know, what I have to laugh at is the people that go, I'm not getting the vaccine because it's going to change the way I think. All right, they're putting this stuff in me that's going to change my thought process and stuff like that. Yeah, okay. I've had the double doses, and my thought process hasn't changed.
I've got a good friend who's a professor of medicine in a big university in the US, and he's one of the people who's been at the core of the development of this nanotechnology that they talk about.
Yep.
And I said, so what's your call on the nanotechnology and the vaccines? He goes, John, they're going to need to use a slightly bigger needle.
I love it. So tell me, you've got a new book, In It for the Long Haul. Can you tell me about what it covers?
Yeah, so the book is, the subtitle of the book is Making the Most of the FIFO Lifestyle. So FIFO is fly in, fly out.
Yep.
Australia has a FIFO workforce of about 200,000 people.
Okay.
And out there on the remote work sites, there's a lot of people that create a lot of challenges for themselves, which results in some mental health challenges, and there's a lot of suicides out there. And a good friend of mine treats one of the very big players in that industry. He's his physiotherapist, and he said that his client was lying on the table one day while he was treating him, and he was almost in tears with anguish as to what to do about the problem out there on the sites, because he didn't know it's been another suicide, and he was telling me about that, and I thought, wow, I'm sure I can help somehow. So I decided to write a book, but the first thing I did was do a survey. And I sent the survey around, and it was very hard to get people to complete it because I think they're a bit suspicious. But anyway, we got some good data back, and 60% of people go out into that role with no plan. And most of them don't come from any sort of wealth, so they lack financial intelligence, and a lot of them get themselves into really significant financial strife.
through lack of advice once they are earning the money. Yeah.
So the book is all about life, and it's about taking control of your life. It's about finding your passion. It's about finding a sense of purpose in what you do in your day-to-day life. It's also about things like creating agreements with your partner when you're going to do this work. And, one of the things that will happen is you can have a worker who's out there working on a mine site, maybe in a construction role, and at 10 o'clock in the morning will go inside to have smoko and pick up their mobile phone, and there's a text message from home saying, you need to come home right now.
Oh, dear.
And, of course, they can't, but those are the ones who haven't done the work to put support structures in place for their families. So the book is all about all of those things.
That sounds so interesting. I know.
For the workers and for their families,
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to getting it out there. The first print will come off in about 2 weeks, and we're just getting 30 preliminary copies done so we can set them out to key industry people to get a bit of feedback before we finalise. And also we want to organise some advance orders. And Greg Chappell wrote the foreword for it.
Yep, fantastic.
Beautiful, because Greg is a passionate human being about people being responsible for their lives and their health and well-being. And, like the guy's been a leader all of his life, and he's leading in a very compassionate way now. So, it's a pretty exciting time.
It's a subject that I'm very much, it's a current for me, because my husband is a paramedic, and he's been a rescue paramedic in the mines, and he's had a few years off, and, just a little bit of personal history. So Alex is my second husband. We met in Bendigo only 3 years ago. And so we've actually had a really great journey the last few years. And but he's been called just in the last week. He was being called up and said, look, we need some more people, some more paramedics up here, would you be prepared to come in, on a part-time type basis and do a swing for us and stuff like that, So he starts next week, and you talk about agreements. One of the things before we got married was I said, we've done this before once. We know what actually didn't work and we knew what worked. So I'm putting together an agreement for us both to agree to how we're going to have our marriage work, right? And so I put that together, and I've often thought of doing a book, because every time I tell people about that, because, my background's accounting, business coaching, sure, I've done mindset, leadership and all of that sort of stuff. But when it comes to relationships, I'm not exposed to being an expert in that area whatsoever, right? So, I've created our agreement, and we have that, we read through our vows and our agreement every quarter. We go away for long weekends, and, and we do all that. And we really, because he's done a lot of work on personal development himself, so we can both look at ourselves quite intently and go, well, we're not being true to our word here, or we're not being responsible here, without making the other party wrong, right? So it's a great way for us to see on how we're moving forward. And, I said, 7 days on, 7 days, how's that going to work for us? And he goes, it'll be fine. Remember, absence makes the heart grow fond. I said, looking forward to that. So, it's quite an apt subject that you're talking to me about around this. And, I also coached a person last year, and he was FIFO into an area in Queensland, and he was actually helping in his spare time. He was actually put together a little personal development course for the people that he knew in there, and he was doing that just as an offshoot. He was going to turn it into a business. I helped him in the startup phase of that for the first 6 months, and so it's a big thing.
Big thing. Well, hoping that we can, because at the end of the day, if I can support the parents to become more stable and happier, well, then that's going to pay off on their kids, and
it's all about next generation. Yeah, that's for sure. So look, the GFactor is a specific set of skills, experiences, disciplines that give you the edge to be successful. That's my GFactor, right? So, you know, the final question that I want to put to you, and to look back, if you look back at all what you've done in your career and you know, where you are today, what's the one skill or discipline that you believe to be the most important to your success? Like, you know, what's your GFactor?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Yeah, I think, God, I could probably list a lot of things, but I think probably living your life or living my life from what we affectionately call a source perspective. In other words, I am the source of everything that I experience. Now, I don't want that to sound like some sort of spiritual masturbation or anything like that.
No.
I'm being genuine here, so that, you know, whatever I experience, somehow I'm creating that.
Yep.
And even if somebody comes up and says something to me that's critical or that puts me down, am I prepared to look at, you know, how did I create that person saying that to me?
Saying that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Because if it shows up in my universe, somehow it's mine, you know. Yep. And that doesn't mean that the answers are instant. Sometimes it can take days for that to land. It depends if I want to use my tools and get an answer quickly or not, or whether I want to be lazy about it, you know. But really, ultimately, that's it for me. And when I landed that at the core of my being, rather than it just being a mental concept, and anybody who's listening to me right now, it's going to be a mental concept. Don't beat yourself up. It's okay. But when I landed that as a core understanding of my life, my mind went quiet. And I live my life with a very quiet mind, and I sleep peacefully. And, you know, people often say to me, "You're so calm. Is that real? You know, when did you get upset?" And I thought, well, I don't really get upset, because I look at things and I find life more amusing than anything else. And because of that, I don't turn things into, I don't create seriousness around things. And and really, I've got to say that's all because I found my way into an Avatar course room one day, you know, and I learned those life skills. And so, yeah, that's it for me, is really from a knowing place that whatever turns up in my universe, it's mine.
That's yours. That's your GFactor. That's why I should be so calm. Yeah, I get that. So, look, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you and contact you, John?
Yeah, sure. Look, my website is wideawakewellness.com.au.
Yeah.
That's easy. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn as well. And either one of those is fine. And get me on, come to my website or come to LinkedIn and come and have a chat.
Come and have a chat, and hopefully your book will be out very soon. In it for the long haul, all around the FIFO workers. And they can come and contact you, get maybe a free copy. I'm not sure. I don't know what you're giving away with that, but anyway, I'll let you have that conversation. Thank you so much for your time, your insights, the depth, and what you're doing around workplace wellness, health, well-being for the world. Because without somebody who has got that courage and boldness about them to step out and do something and share something like this, with that happening, we are in a much better place than without it happening, and that's what I want to say. So, thank you so much, and have a fantastic rest of the day and week.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to connect with you and with your listeners. That's very cool. You know, we're all in this together, so we can all do well, huh?
Oh, we are. We will be. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, John.
Take care. Bye now.